Mark Rogers TV talking ACC football, and some of Georgia Tech's issues from a 3-9 2015 seem to be evident and lingering in the spring game for 2016 on April 23rd. We bring in Joey Weaver from the Rumble seat to help us sort through this. So, Joey, let's get to it. And sometimes, although the defenses you would think would have their way and be a step ahead of the offense, we do see a lot of scoring in typical spring play. But the gold and the white, 13-3.
Yeah, real barn burner. It was, the big thing that kind of was a very, I guess we'll say it was an issue that everybody would agree on for the 2015 team. I mean, there were injuries to different skill positions, and there were other issues all over the field. But the one issue that everyone could kind of agree upon was the offensive line being a problem. Lots of issues with pass protection, lots of issues with players understanding the scheme. It was really a disappointment because you had a lot of senior players. They had 3 players that won't return next year just due to graduation. They've been around for a while. Coming into the spring game, the hope was that maybe they could reconcile some of those. They brought in a new coach. They fired the special teams coordinator, who also was kind of an assistant with the offensive line. They brought in a new offensive line coach to kind of help supplement. That was Ron West. But some of those issues really don't seem to have resolved themselves. They were a little depleted. They were missing their starting center, Freddie Burton. They were missing a guard tackle combo, Chris Griffin, who was maybe their second best returning offensive lineman. He had some lingering injury issues from the tail end of the 2014 season. And so if those guys can be healthy come the fall, they might be in a little bit better shape. But right now the offensive line situation is not looking particularly confidence-inspiring. And so lots of issues definitely kind of showed themselves in the spring game and hopefully don't linger into the season, but something to watch moving forward.
Yeah, if there's a primary storyline that we always jump on with Georgia Tech in reviewing and previewing the games throughout the season, it's, of course, nobody gets to see this offense. It surprises everyone. Nobody can prepare for it. But when you're taking on the defenses that the first and second unit that see it every day in practice, that's another story. And it seems to be a little bit troubling, or maybe you can interpret this for me, when the first team offense led by a veteran quarterback goes 2 for 12 on third down efficiency against the second team defense and really can't generate much of anything.
Yeah, it's the weird kind of part of spring games is if it's low scoring, you can't really tell if it's a dysfunctional offense or a really dominant defense. It might be a little of both. You never know. In this case, I think it was a little of both. There was a lot to like from what we saw, especially from the defensive front. It seems like they've done a really nice job in the last couple of years of building a lot of depth on that defensive line in particular, mainly the defensive end spots. And so there were guys that should very much be in the rotation that were kind of anchoring the second team defense, making it a decently formidable unit, especially up front. They did benefit from some issues with scheme and, again, players kind of understanding where they need to go and blocking. Georgia Tech's offense is the type that when it's working, it can kind of be a thing of beauty, and it can really frustrate people for the other team. And when it's not working, man, I mean, it is just makes you want to, gouge your eyes out. Like, it is brutal to watch. And so that was a little bit of what we saw. It's, a lot of very short gains, tackles for loss. There were a few sacks to be had around, passes being thrown away. And, of course, like you said, I mean, that comes somewhat from development on the defensive line, a little bit of depth there, so that the second team was actually pretty decent. But at the same time, they had a lot of issues, again, with this protection and getting the right guys blocked in the right places to make the whole offense run.
Yeah, there's a couple names that stand out in regards to a lot of the recaps that I see. Defensive tackle Kyle Surge Henderson, also Kashawn Freeman at defensive end, making big plays in the spring game and also capping off a big spring practice. Too much emphasis given on the spring game. It's basically the second or third of 3 or 4 scrimmages. The last of the scrimmages just happens to be in front of 5 or 10 or 50,000 people, depending on the school. Just people in the seats to watch it, and a television crew there to televise it as opposed to the actual football play on the field meaning something. Justin Thomas did what he did when he got loose, 76-yard touchdown run and the 25-yard touchdown pass to Ricky June. Any thoughts about, and I know it's difficult to get information always out of camp in regards to the 15 sessions leading up to the final spring game, but we focus so much on the pessimism and the negativity of the lack of development in certain aspects. But any guys that maybe stepped up in the last month that put themselves in a position where they can make an impact in August?
Yeah, especially on defense, the entire starting secondary is having to be replaced for 2016. You had 4 seniors back there that all graduated after 2015. So we got a look at some, not necessarily new players. We've kind of seen them on the field, but maybe they were in new roles, kind of having to be the guide, stepping up. I know that there were a couple of really nice plays made by cornerbacks, defending passes, sticking with receivers really closely. Again, you can kind of talk about the dichotomy of it. Was it really good coverage or was it poor separation from receivers? You never know. That was really good to see. We saw a lot of good skill position play, some development from guys that were true freshmen last year had to play, guys like Marcus Marshall. We saw a true freshman this year, Dedrick Mills, who was an early enrollee at B-back. He had some really nice runs. A lot of people really liked what they saw from him. Chances that you might see him as a true freshman, assuming that the depth chart and the numbers there work out. J.J. Green, actually a transfer from Georgia, playing at A-back, did some really nice stuff. So it's good seeing some development there. I think that was another big thing that kind of happened last year was Justin Thomas didn't have a whole lot of trust in the skill position players around him because so many players were new. Again, it was a thing from 2014 to 2015. They graduated a ton of very experienced players. And so in replacing them, they had a whole lot of inexperience in players that didn't really understand their role, maybe didn't understand what was being asked of them on different plays. And so it ended up in Justin Thomas kind of forcing things, making the wrong decision out of trying to be risk averse, things like this. And so I think that also kind of helped to dilute the quality of what was going on. If he can keep developing this trust and these players can better understand their roles and what's being asked of them, I think that could help solve a lot of those issues. And I think you saw a lot of better option play for sure from Thomas and the other quarterbacks on Saturday. It felt like there were some missed opportunities on guys that could have been pitched to on the perimeter, with the quarterbacks instead electing to kind of cut up field for better or worse. That's a thing that I can only say so much. I don't know exactly what was being called or in certain situations. So something to monitor and something to keep an eye on, I guess, moving into the season. But in general, there was some good development from some of those skill guys really on both sides of the ball. That's going to be very necessary if Georgia Tech's going to have some success in 2016.
Yeah, it's a theme that we discussed a number of times as the season unraveled there in 2015, where I don't think that we saw anything like it across the country in terms of high end of the scale, top 10 finish, major bowl win in 2014, 3-9 in 2015. So does this program continue to decline, or does it get back and probably settle into that 7-6, 8-5 range that we've been pretty accustomed to under Paul Johnson? But that has yet to be decided for quite a long time. For right now, it's keep these kids healthy and keep them out of trouble until the first week of August, basically, is the goal, I would think, at this point, Joey.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to try to avoid any extra offseason attrition. I think typically what history has told us is that we'll lose 1 to 2 more players, guys who are older but are kind of buried in the depth chart, things like that, who might just elect to move on instead of playing like a fifth-year senior season. But for the most part, news between now and the start of camp will not be good news. And so trying to keep distractions to a minimum, try to keep everybody healthy and on the field so that they're ready to go come fall camp, because they're really going to need all hands on deck to make sure that there isn't a repeat of the 2015 season when we get there this fall, for sure.
Joey Weaver from the Rumble Seat setting us straight on Georgia Tech football as we wrap up spring practice. All right, it's always a pleasure, Joey.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Enjoyed it.